residual of having this kind of trauma in my life, then I am screwing up my kids. Well, I am here to tell you, not as a therapist, but before I was a therapist, I was a client, and when I was a therapist, I was still a client. So, being on the other side of trauma as a client really helps me to be what Dick Schwartz calls a merchant, hope merchant, a merchant of hope. So I have both a felt sense of being able to move through trauma, to have developmental trauma, have attachment trauma, and be on the other side of it, because all of these things, there are corrective experiences that I don't want to say we get cured, but we develop, we have corrective experiences that change what happened early on. But that takes a long time, right? So when you have developmental trauma, when your brain is being developed, that's when these things are happening. So if there's not somebody there to protect you, if you're neglected, if you're abused, if certain things happen, then your attachment styles are different, right? So was saying about secure attachment. I'm going to talk a lot about this, but the only reason that I'm bringing it up in this way is because I would have taught for a whole day already on trauma, right? Before we get to adverse child experiences, before we get to attachment, right? I usually say, here's the story. I'm going to tell you the difference between single incident and complex PTSD. And it's from my own practice. So I was probably a therapist for about 15 years, and it was October, and there were two 19-year-old girls that were coming in to see me within 3 weeks of one another. And the first is this nurse calls me up, and I live 2 doors down from a nurse. So it's her friend, and she says, I know that you do EMDR. My daughter was away at college, and she was raped at a frat party. And I only know this because her roommate called and, said that she was getting worse and worse, that she wasn't eating, she wasn't sleeping, she was, really, she didn't use the word hypervigilant, but that's what she was describing. And she said that she knows my neighbor, and she gave her my name. So would I be willing to see her? And so I said, yeah, absolutely. So she comes in, and if you looked at her, she's gaunt, her eyes are sunken in, she's pale. When she starts to talk, her eyes are racing, her eyes are darting around, and her voice is very, very shaky. She can't really tell me any kind of story, but she says, can I tell, my mother knows the story. Can I let my mother tell the story? If anything's wrong, I'll interject. And so I say, yeah. So the mother tells the story of her, being at this frat party, being raped, and then, all the terrible things that happened after. So I say, let me ask you something. Are you willing to close your eyes? Because a lot of people aren't willing to close their eyes. I say, if you're willing to close your eyes, close your eyes. If not, I just want you to pick a spot where you won't be distracted. So she's still sitting next to her mother. And she says, okay. And so she looks away. She doesn't close her eyes. And I say, can you remember a time when you felt really in control? When you felt like things were going well and you were having fun, maybe just, a time when you didn't feel overwhelmed like this. And she smiled, and well, obviously she was in the room for about 20 minutes, and I hadn't seen anything except this terror on her face. So she has her eyes, her gaze averted, and she's telling, yes, I have this experience right before I went away to college where she has three sibs. She said, I have three little brothers. I have three brothers and sisters, and I was in the one boat. My parents were in the other boat. We were up the Poconos, and they had this hot dog stand over here. But we were, I was in charge of all the kids, and they were looking at me, and they were saluting, and it was a ball. And as I looked at her, you could see her whole physiology changed. She was able to shift states from this hyper aroused, hyper vigilant state of sympathetic arousal into, more calm. She didn't stay calm. She didn't stay calm, but she was calm enough to be able to bring up these things. I asked some questions about, if you don't do a really good assessment, you're going to do terribly with this client. But I did a really good assessment with her, and it turns out that basically, she's the oldest of four kids. She has an intact family, like I was talking about earlier. She has lots of friends. High school, she was in a lot. She wasn't like the captain of all the teams, but she was on a lot of the teams, and she was very popular. She was on student council. She wasn't the president, but again, she had a lot of friends, and she had a lot of interests, and she went to college, and she was undeclared her major. But she said, she had been doing a lot of volunteer stuff at high school. So when she went to college, she did, she was Women Against Rape. She did a suicide hotline, and she did other things that were much more fun than those things. But she was able to tell me those kind of things. And basically what it was, an intact family. She had losses, like I said, they weren't chronic losses, and they weren't, one after the other. And there were adults there that could hold that grief, or could be there for her. So I say, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to stop over. I have a friend. He's a psychiatrist. He's right at the end of this hall. If you stop in there, he's going to give you 3 pills. They're called propanolol. Propanolol is an old blood pressure medication. And the woman who was sitting there, who's her mother, happens to be a nurse. So she says, oh, yeah, I know what propanolol is. She says I said, well, they give it for performance anxiety, and they give it sometimes for nightmares. I said, it's not going to put you to sleep. I was talking to the girl. I said, it's not going to put you to sleep, but it's going to calm your physiology down, and you don't have to take it. But if you want to take, if you want to see if it'll help, please do stop by. I'm going to see you tomorrow morning, and tomorrow morning I'm going to tell you to bring in anything that makes you feel a little bit better. And one of the things that I remind her of is when people go away to college, they usually bring something from home that makes them feel connected, that makes them feel, attached, but not homesick. It's that transition object. Do you have anything like that? And she says, both her mother, and she smiled and say yes. So she has a piece of this old, and it's not a teddy bear, but it was something like that. So she's going to bring that in. And she asks if she can bring her boyfriend in. So I say, anything that is going to make you feel safe, I absolutely want you to do that. So when she comes in the next day, she hadn't taken the propanolol, she still looked like shit, right? So she's real drawn, the eyes, she's still, she's really, really shaky at this point. So she says, can she sit between the two? Yes. Okay. And if at any time that changes, and you want them, and it's better for you to have them outside, that's what we'll do. And everybody agrees to this. And so I asked her to bring up the image again of her up at the Poconos, and she's able to do that. She has both of their hands. So she's sitting here like one hand in her mother's and one hand in her boyfriend's. And she doesn't look safe, right? But she feels a little bit better doing this. So I asked her, bring up bring it up when she's in this boat again. And she said it's harder than it was yesterday, but she's able to do it. And I say, tell me what was so good about this. And she starts talking about, seeing her little sister's eyes. And I ask her what she sees in this, it's imaginal, but it's a memory. I say, so in this memory, so, what's the best part of it? They're looking at me, we're having a ball. And I say, and what do you notice in your body? She says, it feels a little bit looser. I don't feel like I have to open my eyes and look all around. I feel like it's kind of heavy. And then I ask her just basically, if there's another place where she feels okay. And she says, in her bedroom at home. And so I say, okay, imagine yourself in your bedroom at home. What's so good about this? She says, I feel like I have my privacy, but if I need anything, people will be there. Okay, so I have her just kind of to stay there for a moment, and we're doing a little bit of tapping because it's, a pre-EMDR. So we're kind of tapping those into her nervous systems. So I do EMDR with her, and 40 minutes later, she has no symptoms, right? So she's going to go home with no symptoms. I tell her, you might continue to process this. You might have some dreams tonight. You may not. None of this is, set in stone. I said, but what I'd like to tell you is there's no right way for this to happen. But my belief is that tomorrow when you wake up, that, this will be a memory. It's not going to be something that it feels like it's happening now, something that's playing itself out in your body as if you have to run or if you have to fight. We've already discharged that fight flight energy, and you move through those emotions that you were unable to do because of the overwhelm. And now the belief that used to be, when I say used to be, it was an hour ago, your belief was that you believe that you're unsafe, or the world, the world is not safe. And now that you believe that, most of the time you're safe, but you have to, you have to be careful. Okay, so we tap, so all of that is the end of the EMDR session. And I just, I'll check in with you tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And I really, I don't expect anything to happen, but I'm going to check in because everybody thinks, well, if she doesn't mean this, right? So anyway, I call her the next day at 6 o'clock, and she says she got out of the shower and she felt all the pain she felt the next day, the day after the rape, felt all those pains, but it lasted for like maybe a minute, and then everything just kind of washed away. And she hasn't had symptoms. She feels sad, and she feels, she feels like, what should I have done different, up there? And she's going to reach out to some of her friends. Okay, that's single incident trauma. And like I said, EMDR is a modality I'm very familiar with because I teach it. But the reason I teach it is because for single incident trauma, it is miraculous. Like I said, this person was, for like a month, right? So she was with all of these symptoms, not sleeping, not eating, not able to feel, she didn't feel safe anywhere. She wasn't able to leave her room. She's, all of that. And then after, say 2 sessions, one's with a good assessment, and then an EMDR session and a follow-up phone call, that is gone. That is, I don't want to say cure because I'm really just holding space for people to heal, but it is the cure for single incident trauma.